Today on the podcast, we have the co-owner and co-founder of a rare clothing company. Imagine Goods partners with vulnerable people around the world to make vintage-inspired products that pay fair wages and create opportunity. Ayana and her business partner, Michelle Keim, recently won the Audience Award at the Social Enterprise Pitch here in Pennsylvania, where they made everyone cry and cheer simultaneously. Kedra and I were live streaming it from our honeymoon in Provincetown, and we shouted for joy at the end of their pitch. Ayana recently got back from a trip to Cambodia and is launching a new high-end line that may appeal to those of you who love the aesthetics of MM Lafleur, but who want to embrace sustainable, socially responsible practices. Welcome to The Behaviorist with Work Wisdom, where we help you adopt high-performance mindsets, behaviors, communication, and culture. I'm your host, Sarah Colantonio. And today our guest is Ayana Ehrman, the co-founder of Imagine Goods and co-owner. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Absolutely. So I want to hear about the new line. I want to hear the name and a little bit about it. For our listeners.
Yeah, great. So Philomela is a name that comes from a story in Greek mythology. So Philomela was a woman who was sexually assaulted by her sister's husband, who then cut her tongue out in an effort to keep her quiet. And in an effort to gain justice, she wove her story, the story of what had happened to her, into a tapestry and presented it to the gods in a request for justice. They granted her request and turned her and her sister into birds so that they could fly away and be free. So Philomela, as a name, we felt represented so much of what we stand for, what we do. The idea that most of our artisans are survivors of trafficking, sexual trafficking specifically. So the idea that these are women who are survivors. And then also the idea, we loved the idea in the story of Philomela, she took control. She knew what she wanted. She wanted liberty, and she, despite being voiceless, she found a way to make it happen and to ask for what she wanted. And that is so true of so many of our artisans. I think it has become sort of common parlance in the world of, speaking about the less fortunate or the vulnerable, that they are voiceless. But that actually isn't true, really, is it? I mean, they have voices. I think sometimes their voices are shushed, and it makes those of us who are not them uncomfortable, even those of us who really actually want to support them. It is highly uncomfortable to hear someone's story who has experienced this. So, and especially because a lot of the women we work with are then, doubly exploited, because they often, if, they are rescued, sometimes the only work they are given or given the opportunity for is exploitative work. Cambodia has a lot of manufacturing, a lot of garment manufacturing, and the conditions are not always great. Right. And so we, a lot of times, even those of us in the West who, theoretically hate the idea of trafficking, we understand that it is modern day slavery. We nonetheless sort of resist the ties to the way we live. We don't want to think about the fact that the way we shop actually can further exploit women who are vulnerable, or even sometimes push them into a situation where they are trafficked. So Philomela, a long answer to a short question. It's the name of our new line. Yeah,
that's wonderful. I think this is such an important issue, and so I really appreciate you coming on and talking about it. I was watching a documentary about sweatshops and the garment industry, and this one woman, she was like, well, yeah, I mean, at least it's even though the conditions aren't great in the sweatshops, at least they're not being sex trafficked. She's like, I know it's horrible to say. And I was like, oh my word, like, what has happened to us that's like, we're okay with that level. So it's so important that we have a company like yours that is directly dealing with this. So you've been doing this for 12 years.
Yes, different iterations of it. Yes.
What motivates you to keep going?
Well, the stories of the women who work with us, who are our artisans, that, I suppose in some ways I am greatly privileged and also, burdened by the privilege of hearing their stories. But, I get to hear the really beautiful, hopeful stories of women whose lives have been completely transformed. And it is that hope that gives motivation, right? I think if it were a situation where we looked at it and felt hopeless and felt overwhelmed by the burden of the awfulness of a scenario, well, you get stuck when you get overwhelmed. It's really hard for anyone who feels that to ever feel like they can do anything. But I have the great privilege of seeing stories of beautiful redemption and, entire families whose lives are different. And that always, sort of lifts my spirits on the days when, what I'm doing is essentially just an office job. I'm writing invoices and, sending letters with, customer service issues and quality control issues, and to, some boutiques who buy our products wholesale, and, it's a business. And so I do have to, I have to come back to the stories of hope. That is what drives me.
A lot of the leaders we encounter at Work Wisdom, they have practices that foster success for themselves, help them control the likelihood of a good outcome in a given situation. What are the practices that help you?
I am someone who takes deep value, deep joy, sort of sustaining joy in the concept of something that is bigger than myself, and specifically in the idea of a loving God. That is something that is centering to me, and specifically, I a couple of years ago, I was going through a difficult time, and I instituted a practice in which I believe that God shows her love to me through beauty. I just believe that, that my eyes were made to see that beautiful sunset and this crocus. And, yesterday I saw the first tree blooms. I think it was a cherry tree that was just starting. It was incredible. And, I sort of have this, I don't know if it's a theology, ideology, something that I believe that this is how God shows her love to us, is by this incredible beauty that surrounds us. So I instituted this practice of focusing on those things. I think sometimes, especially when we're in seasons of high stress or difficulty, we can walk by these things and forget to meditate on the joy that beauty can give us. The little things, I think it's Mary Oliver who had a poem that, it doesn't have to be the blue iris, right? It can be the dandelion in a parking lot. And, you look at it and it's astonishing. It's beautiful. And this is centering for me to feel like there is something bigger, greater than me, and not just sort of existentially bigger than me, but also longer than me in the sense of historically, I am this this tiny part of a history of people who have fought, to change the way things are done for the better. And that is centering for me. So
That's perfect.
mm.
What are the most inspirational podcast episodes, songs, poems? You just mentioned Mary Oliver that you read or
Yeah.
listen to.
Yeah.
What are your recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, geez, Mary Oliver is, I love the sense of the sacred ordinary in Mary Oliver's
Yeah.
work. You know, she teaches you to look at the, the ordinary things that you very quickly in life, people learn to look past the bare trees on a bleak day. You forget that this is actually incredible. It's beautiful. And if you can draw from these ordinary life rhythms, ordinary circumstances, I doing the dishes can be a spiritual experience for me.
Yeah.
There's this ordinary sense of doing something that needs to be done, and then you finish and you've accomplished something.
Yeah.
I think there is, so Mary Oliver for that. In the last couple of years, I have gotten a lot out of the podcast Ear Hustle, which is so Ear Hustle was made by and about prisoners at San Quentin State Penitentiary out in California. And it was, made by prisoners themselves who were wanting to tell the story of what their lives are like. And it, anything that helps me experience something that is completely outside of my realm of experience, in which, I've never been to prison. A lot of the men who are telling their stories are from very low income backgrounds. A lot of them come from places where gang life was the norm. And so there are these experiences that are so far outside of my own experience. Yeah. And anything that can help me see that and understand it a little bit, I find incredibly valuable for my own life. And that podcast has absolutely been one. I think another podcast that I don't know if there's a specific episode really, but so Seth Godin has a podcast called Akimbo. And it's I find it, they are short little snippet podcasts, and I always walk away challenged in the way that I am thinking about something. And I think mostly he challenges people to think outside the box, to think creatively, especially when it comes to marketing in terms of, at its core, marketing is an attempt to challenge cultural norms.
Yeah.
It's an attempt to help people think through the cultural norm that they have accepted and maybe get them to think a little bit differently. So as a business person, that has been incredibly useful, because thinking in creative terms about marketing and how to tell the story of what I do has been really valuable. So
okay, that's great. That's especially so I've heard of Seth Godin, but the other one I have never heard of, and I love this idea of, it's like that idea of the bubble hop, getting out of our own experience and having a new perspective based on somebody else's. I love that about art that we can do that. It's perfect.
And music, and yes, there's so many artistic mediums that help you do that in a way that is, so deeply impactful. So,
Kedren recently wrote an article about fearless leadership, and you were one of the people that she talked about in that article, sort of highlighting the courage that she's seen come from you. And so, she wanted me to ask this question: what's required the most courage from you in launching your new line. What's been sort of the toughest?
Well, I don't know if this, well, the risk of failure in every way.
Sure.
Is that a small enough concept of courage? I think, two things really. One is the idea that our new line, Philomela, takes Imagine Goods somewhere we have not been before. And that is that we are trying to create pieces that are more upscale than the way we started. Originally, when we started Imagine Goods, we had this idea that we were creating products that were affordable, so accessible to a broad swath of people in the West, and accessible both financially and in design. And what I mean by that, financially, obviously, we wanted them to be affordable. In design, we wanted people to have an ethically made product that they actually wanted. Right. So sort of design-wise, something that, they would go into any store and think, oh, I really like that. Oh, and it's ethically made. Awesome. Right. But we never really had this, what is somewhat essential in most businesses of, a profit margin.
Right.
So the new line, the idea is that we'll be creating something that is a little more upscale, but with that, comes a greater pressure, especially design-wise, because with our more affordable products, we could afford to fail quickly. We could afford to create a new product, and if it didn't work, we didn't make it again, and that was not a big deal. With this, we're investing a good bit more in the outset, into the pattern cutting and into the design itself, into the fabrics. We're, using fair trade, all hand woven, naturally dyed fabrics that is, not inexpensive. And so the idea that we are wanting to create this product that is survivor made by survivors of trafficking, but that is going to cost a little bit more. We can't afford to fail on it very much.
Gotcha.
we need it to work. And the question for me, design-wise, is, and I suppose it's always this way for people in this field, but is this actually what people want? Do they want something that is a classic silhouette with modern touches, which is what we're going for? Or do they actually want fast fashion that is new every 2 weeks? Because that's the way fashion is going. It's, now it's created by AI. It evaluates street fashion through social media and creates new pieces every 2 weeks, right? Which is crazy. So this is what we're competing against. And the question is, people say they want ethically made products. They want a classic piece they can wear, this season and next year. But are they actually? Is that what they really want? Are they going to want it enough to buy it? So that's a big question. The fear of failure, and if we fail, it sort of is a make or break point for Imagine Goods. That if we fail design-wise, then we fail financially. And if Philomela fails financially, then Imagine Goods is in a tough spot. And so it's all on the line, basically, is what I'm saying here, Sarah.
Okay.
It all requires courage, great courage. And, granted, courage with a lot of wise insight from people who know what they're doing. So we're not just haphazardly going out there and creating design pieces. We feel like we have a strong business model. We feel like we have our financial predictions in place. We feel like we have really good input for the designs. So we have all that, but it's still a risk. Yeah. So it takes courage.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm going to tell everyone I know. I'm just going to tell everyone. And,
excellent. Yeah. Thank you. Well, you are by having me on your podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. We'll have you back.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
All right. That's great. I'm so excited about this launching. And I think, I think it comes down to really, though, people, Kedren always quotes the psychologist Rapai about, he always talks about hand. Like we it's nice to have things that are made quickly or whatever, but when it comes down to it, we want like the thing. We want the actual thing.
Yeah.
And this is such a powerful way to act against something that is really horrible in the world. Like this is a way that we can fight. So I love it, and I think people are going to love it too. I think it's a calculated risk. I think it's a smart one, for sure.
Great. Yeah.
Just based on it, really, going back to the social enterprise pitch. I mean, people in the audience even though we watched it online, it just seemed like people were crying and they were amazed and they were. So anyway, I think that's exciting.
Yes, it is. It is exciting. I mean, that was so affirming for us. We hear a lot when we're at events and selling our products and we actually meet our customers face to face.
Yeah.
We hear over and over again that people love what we're doing. They love our products. But we don't actually often have that kind of affirmation because we sell online and we sell wholesale to boutiques. And so we don't meet our customers face to face in a brick and mortar. Right. So that event, having people really affirm us in that way was really meaningful for us. So, yeah.
What advice do you have for our listeners who are trying to find their courage? What can they do, or how can they behave to take the risks that are worth taking?
I listened to this podcast a while ago, or no, it was actually, I think it was a TED Talk. So it was this by this Chinese man named Jia Jiang. If I'm saying that correctly, and he did an experiment. He was really afraid of failure and rejection. And so he instituted an experiment called 100 Days of Failure. And he very deliberately went out and asked for things, tried to do things that were improbably they had a high chance of rejection. So he asked things like he went to a car dealership and asked a salesperson to give him a lesson on selling cars and was told no. And he sort of asked these really crazy random things. He went to somebody's house and asked them if he could plant a plant in their garden, and they said no. And I think for him, originally the idea was that he could inure himself to the concept of rejection by deliberately being rejected. But he was surprised to find out that it did that, but it also taught him a lot about how to gain something surprisingly. And so what he found was a lot of people said yes to him for really surprising things. He asked if he could make an announcement on the loudspeaker on a flight. He asked a flight attendant, and surprisingly they said yes. So I think what he learned, though, was, certain things about, how you ask and how you engage people. So it was really useful for that. But I think for me, the takeaway was more along the idea of, a lot of times rejection and failure is scary because we actually haven't done it enough.
Yeah, right.
So for me, putting myself in a place where I can experience failure, making it a commonplace occurrence. Yeah. It takes the fangs out of it. It demystifies it in a way, because there's something about failure that when you don't know what it's going to be like to fail at something, it's even scarier. But once you have failed and you realize, it wasn't the end of the world, it takes the fangs out of it. And then you will, have a much higher chance of actually doing things you want to do when you're trying things. Isn't there an sort of probably overused expression that if you aim for nothing, you'll hit your target?
Right.
So I think, I suppose my advice that I daily try to live is the idea that just try. I'm just going to try, and I will survive the consequences of failure, the rejection. I'll survive. I think there is a certain, probably a level of humility too that is necessary to survive failure or rejection, and so building that into a thought practice of it affects the outcome when you're trying to do new things. This concept of epistemic humility, the humility of how I know things or what I know about things. Always trying to keep in mind, there's a lot I don't know.
Right.
And that actually helps me to learn much quicker than if I sort of assumed that I did really know a lot about everything already. And I find that it also helps with courage to, if I go out there and I know that I don't know everything, it actually, in some ways, maybe paradoxically, requires less courage because I'm not going out there, with the stance that I know what I'm doing. And then you also have the added benefit that people help. People come alongside you when you are humble about what you need, what you don't have in and of yourself. We have found that people are generous, with knowledge, with insight, with help. It really, I think, in some ways, is an affirming of humanity. That we have found the helpfulness of people, the generosity of others.
So when you encounter disappointment, if that happens, what do you do? You said you're going to survive it. How do you manage it, or even rebound and are strengthened by it?
I think for me, a lot of managing disappointment comes with a face-on assessment of the disappointment. And, when I can honestly and with integrity, and I guess what I mean by that is not trying to diminish any of the hurt or the frustration, acknowledging that those are things that I feel, the disappointment, the actual consequences of failure, of rejection, of disappointment, whatever it is, but actually looking at those things for what they are, because I think there is something about when you become really afraid to actually look at the consequences of your failure or of your disappointment, when you're afraid to really acknowledge that you're angry or that you are deeply hurt by something, that is super unhelpful. It doesn't allow you to then go on to evaluate, what went wrong? And how can I do it differently next time? And, I have always been a firm believer in the concept of fast failure, finding what is working, what is not working. And if it's not working, just don't do it. But it's really hard to do that if you're afraid to look at what's not working. So there is an element of courage involved in this as well. The idea that if you are honest with yourself and your emotions, and with the facts of the failure, it really will help you build on the failure towards something that is more successful. So
that's good. So last but not least, what's the best piece of advice you've ever been given that you can share with our listeners today?
I was thinking about this, Sarah. I was thinking about this concept. I don't know that it's a piece of advice necessarily, but it is It is the phrase that I sort of think of as the foundational phrase behind Imagine Goods, and why I began doing this 12 years ago at all. And it was Mother Teresa's quote, we can do no great things, only small things with great love.
Yeah.
And this idea that, I don't have to set out to do this fantastic, noteworthy thing that will, reach a broad audience to wide acclaim. I can just do this little thing. I can do this that's in front of me with great love.
Yeah.
And if it grows, fabulous. And if it is always just this little thing that I am doing, that is absolutely still worthwhile and valuable. So I think for me, that is a concept that allows me the courage to continue daily doing what I'm doing in more ways than just in my business, obviously, in other areas of life as well. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love it. That's perfect. Thank you for being so fierce and so courageous. I'm glad to know you. And we're so grateful that you're part of this movement of you're not only helping world changers, you are a world changer. So thank you again for sharing your story with us. Thank you, listeners, for downloading The Behaviorist. We hope you'll subscribe. Please reach out to us through our website, workwisdomllc.com, where you can enjoy Work Wisdom Press productions, ask questions and suggestions of topics you'd like us to explore in future episodes. And check out Imagine Goods, please. Keep an eye out for the new line that's coming out. Thank you again so much, Ayanna.
Thank you, Sarah.
As is our custom, we'll leave you with 1 Minute Wisdom by Anthony DeMello. The master insisted that what she taught was nothing. What she did was nothing. Her disciples gradually discovered that wisdom comes to those who learn nothing, unlearn everything. That transformation is the consequence not of something done, but of something dropped.